Rain hammered the windows of Aurelio, the city's most exclusive restaurant, with the kind of persistence that felt personal. It wasn't a gentle drizzle. It was a hard, relentless downpour that turned the sidewalk into mirrors and made the streetlights outside look like they were melting. Inside, Aurelio was its own universe. Crystal chandeliers floated above white tablecloths, so clean it looked untouched by human hands. The air smelled like truffle butter, an expensive restraint. Soft piano music hid behind conversations, and every sound was carefully absorbed by velvet, glass, and money. At table 17 sat Marcus Thorne, 62 years old. Net worth, $4.3 billion. Dining companions, 0. He sat with the posture of a man who never needed to shift for comfort. His suit was tailored so perfectly, it looked like it belonged to his body more than his skin did. His cufflinks caught the chandelier light in a subtle flash, the kind of detail only people with time to notice would ever notice. Marcus didn't notice details for beauty. He noticed them for control. A server glided to his table and set down his plate with a trained smile that never asked for anything and never offered warmth. The staff already knew the routine. They didn't ask how his day was. They didn't comment on the weather. They didn't call him sir with any emotion behind it. They treated him like a fixture, a predictable asset, exactly how he liked it. His fork scraped bone china as he cut into a $48 per ounce filet mignon. The sound was sharp in the quiet, like metal whispering against porcelain. He chewed slowly, barely tasted it. Across from him, the chair sat empty like a scar that never healed. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't bad luck. It was a decision he made every night, for 23 years. Around him, other tables were alive. Couples leaned toward each other with that warm kind of secrecy. Friends laughed too loud after the second bottle of wine. Someone lifted a glass for a toast, and the people around them smiled, as if joy was contagious when you were seated at the right table. Marcus's eyes drifted, not to the people, but to the motion, the rhythm of connection. The simple fact that humans still did this, still reached for each other without fear of losing something. He took a sip of wine he didn't choose himself. Someone else chose it for him, because someone else always chose things for him. Sommeliers, assistants, advisors. The advantage of being Marcus Thorne was that you never had to think about the small things. The price of being Marcus Thorne was that you rarely did. He set the glass down, gaze settling again on the empty chair. The space across from him felt louder than the restaurant. And then something changed. Through the rain-streaked window stood a small figure. A girl, maybe 10 years old, soaked to the bone. Her hair stuck to her forehead in wet strands. Her coat looked too thin for the weather, pulled tight at the waist like she was trying to keep herself from disappearing. Her shoes were dark with water, and her posture was still, unnaturally still for a child. Face pressed to the glass. Not begging, not tapping, not waving, just watching. Watching him eat, Marcus noticed immediately. Of course he did. People like Marcus lived by noticing the things others missed. A nervous glance from an investor. The slight tremor in a voice during a negotiation. The subtle lean of someone approaching with an agenda. He could read a room in seconds. And this child outside the window did not belong in his room. His jaw tightened, but he didn't acknowledge her. In his experience, acknowledging poverty invited it to your table. His eyes stayed on his plate. He cut another piece of steak, chewed, swallowed. The food felt like texture, not nourishment. Like he was performing the act of eating, because it was what his routine demanded. The girl didn't move. The rain ran down the glass between them like a living barrier. The restaurant was warm. Outside looked brutal. Two different worlds separated by a single window. Marcus signaled the maître d' with a small gesture, barely a lift of his fingers. The Mater D appeared as if summoned by thought. "Yes, Mr. Thorne." "The girl outside?" Marcus said quietly. "Handle it." The Mater D nodded, expression smooth and practiced. He moved toward the entrance, his steps controlled, as if even dealing with poverty required elegance. He spoke to her through the door. Marcus saw the movement of his mouth, saw him point gently, saw him make the kind of polite request meant to remove inconvenience without conflict. The girl shook her head, didn't step away, didn't plead, didn't point at Marcus's table or gesture for attention. She simply kept watching. The Mater D tried again, a little firmer this time. The girl's face didn't change. Finally, she backed away, disappearing into the rain like a shadow slipping under a door. Marcus exhaled slowly. He resumed eating like nothing happened. His wine cost more than most people's monthly rent. His suit cost more than their cars. The watch on his wrist could cover someone's medical bills and still shine like it was untouched. But his loneliness? Priceless. Because Marcus Thorne had learned something the hard way. Everyone had a price. Everyone wanted something. And the moment you gave it to them, they took everything else. He hadn't been born bitter. He had been built that way. 23 years ago, Marcus was different. He smiled more, trusted more. He used to shake hands without thinking about how tight the grip was. He used to believe people meant what they said. He had a wife he adored, Catherine. She had a laugh that used to pull him back from the edge of stress. She'd brush her fingers along his arm when he got too intense, like she was grounding him. She called him Ang in that teasing way that made him feel like the richest man alive, even before he actually became one. And he had a business partner he called brother, Richard. They built Thorne Industries together from nothing but ambition and exhaustion. Late nights, early mornings, high risk, shared victories. The kind of bond you believe is unbreakable because you can't imagine someone choosing greed over loyalty when you've bled together. Then came the merger. Thorne Industries' biggest deal. The kind of deal that didn't just change a balance sheet, it changed history. What Marcus didn't know was that while lawyers drafted contracts and analysts ran projections, Catherine and Richard were writing their own story behind his back. For over a year. An affair, a slow poison. Secrets exchanged like currency. Lies delivered with perfect timing and calm faces. And worse, they weren't just betraying him emotionally. They were selling shares, feeding secrets to competitors, trading pieces of his company like they were trading pieces of his heart. When Marcus found out, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A folder placed on his desk. A phone call from an investigator. Receipts, transfers, hotel records, emails, evidence. The kind of evidence that doesn't allow denial. Marcus remembered staring at the pages until the words stopped looking like language and started looking like violence. He remembered the first physical sensation wasn't anger. It was disbelief. As if his mind had stepped backward from reality to avoid being hit. He went home and found Catherine in the kitchen, humming softly as she made tea. Like they were normal. Like he was safe. Like she hadn't been slicing him open for a year. He watched her hands, her face. He waited for guilt to flicker across her features. It never did. The betrayal cost him 40% of his company, his reputation, and every ounce of trust he had in human beings. Investors questioned his judgment. The board circled like wolves. Competitors smiled in public and sharpened knives in private. Friends stopped calling. Not because they hated him. Because disaster makes people uncomfortable, and Marcus had become proof that even the powerful could be gutted overnight. Catherine got 20 million. Richard got a golden parachute. Marcus got table 17. Every night. For 23 years, he rebuilt his fortune with cold, stubborn precision. He recovered power, influence, respect. But he never rebuilt his faith in people. So he ate alone. It was simpler, cleaner. The staff knew the routine. 8:15. Same table, same order. They treated him like a revenue stream, not a person. Exactly how he liked it. No expectations, no warmth, no risk. Isolation became his version of safety. Until a 10-year-old girl refused to stop appearing on the other side of the glass. Her name was Lily Collins. While Marcus finished his steak in a room full of chandeliers and filtered laughter, Lily walked 3 miles home to the apartment she shared with her mother. The neighborhood changed with each block. The city's polished lights gave way to broken street lamps. Storefront windows became boarded wood. The sidewalks cracked like tired bones. Lily walked with her head slightly down, but her eyes alert. She knew the corners that belonged to trouble. She knew which groups watched too long. She knew which alleys swallowed sound. She didn't walk like a child. She walked like someone who had learned early that the world doesn't pause because you're small. Her building was crumbling brick, once red, now the color of old blood. The front door hung by one hinge. The lobby smelled of urine and something deeper than dirt. The elevator had been broken since she was 6. 4 flights up. Past M.R. Peterson sleeping on the 3rd floor landing, bottle in hand. Lily stepped around him with the casual skill of someone who'd done it 100 times. To apartment 4C with 3 locks. Not because they had valuables. Because locks were the cheapest form of peace. "Mom?" Lily called softly as she opened the door. The apartment was smaller than Marcus's closet. One room served as living room, kitchen, dining room, everything. A threadbare couch. A mini fridge humming like it was overworked. 2 burners, only one reliable. A small table propped up with medical textbooks. Everything was spotlessly clean. Someone had tried very hard to create dignity here. "In here, honey." Sarah Collins appeared, leaning on a walking stick. 35, but looking 50? Gaunt, gray-haired. Every movement carried pain like a shadow. 3 years since the accident, and it still lived inside her bones. But her eyes were sharp. Nurse eyes, the kind that read people in a heartbeat. "You're late," Sarah said, not angry, just tired. "I stopped at the library," Lily answered quickly. Sarah's gaze studied her. Damp hair, cold reddened cheeks, the faint tremble in her hands. "Lily," Sarah warned. Lily swallowed, then rushed into it, like her heart couldn't hold it any longer. "There's this restaurant," Lily said. "Aurelio. A man eats there every night, alone. He looks so lonely." Sarah sighed, the sound heavy, like she was carrying more than her body could handle. "Baby, you can't stand outside fancy restaurants. Those people don't care about us. But he looks like—" Lily struggled for the words. "Like he forgot what it feels like to be seen." Sarah's mouth tightened. Hope was dangerous. Kindness from the wrong people came with hooks. "Promise me you won't go back," Sarah said. Lily went quiet. Another small lie formed in her throat because she didn't want to fight, and because she didn't know how to explain that this felt bigger than rules. "I promise," she whispered. But she couldn't shake the image of Marcus's empty chair. The way he stared at it, like it was the only honest thing in the room. The next night, Lily went back. Marcus saw her immediately. His fork paused mid-her. A flicker of irritation rose because she had entered his world again without permission. He didn't acknowledge her. After 15 minutes, Imadardi sent her away. 3rd night, she brought a broken umbrella. Stood there with it, like it was a shield. Marcus timed her without meaning to. 32 minutes. 4th night, she brought another kid. Marcus called the police, his patience thinning into something sharper. But they vanished before anyone arrived. 5th night, Marcus requested table 9, no window. He ate without looking out, without thinking about her. Or tried to. But when he left, he saw her across the street, under a broken streetlight, still watching. Their eyes met. Marcus looked away first, and that detail bothered him more than it should have. That night, Marcus's penthouse waited for him on the 42nd floor, 7,000 square feet, $42 million. Floor-to-ceiling windows with views for miles. Completely empty. Museum-quality furniture no one used. A kitchen with appliances untouched. A dining table seating 12 that never held guests. The silence was so complete, he turned on the TV just for voices. Not because he cared what played. Because he needed proof that humans still existed somewhere. He poured 25-year-old scotch, $200 a glass. He drank it like medicine. Then he stood at the window and looked down at millions of lives below. Why did she keep coming back? What did she want? Everyone wanted something. His phone buzzed with tomorrow's schedule. Meetings, investors, calls, and dinner at Aurelio, 8:15. As always, the same day as yesterday. And the day before, Marcus was 62. Had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. Could go anywhere, do anything, buy anything. So why did he feel trapped in a glass box? Sleep didn't come easily. Because for the first time in 23 years, Marcus Thorne wondered if eating alone was victory, or just another kind of prison. The 11th night, everything changed. November had been clinging to the city like a wet coat, but now December was pushing in colder, sharper, less forgiving. The rain wasn't just rain anymore. It was the kind of cold that seeped into bone and stayed there. The kind that made even the rich hurry from car doors to warm lobbies like they were still human. Aurelio was full. The chandeliers glowed. The piano played something soft and expensive. The restaurant's warmth wrapped around its guests like a promise. In here, you are safe. In here, the world cannot touch you. Marcus Thorne sat at table 17. As always, the staff moved around him with practiced reverence and practiced distance. They poured his wine without asking if he wanted it. They replaced his napkin if it shifted. They kept the chair across from him empty like a rule, like a monument. And Marcus kept eating alone because it was the only decision he'd made consistently for 23 years. 8-20-2. Perfect, as always. His steak was served at the exact temperature he demanded. The garnish was placed with care. The plate looked like art that would be swallowed and forgotten. Marcus lifted his fork. Fork to mouth. Tap. The sound was small. Almost nothing. But in a room built to soften every harsh edge, it cut clean through the atmosphere. Marcus froze. His fork hovered an inch from his lips. Tap. 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 Not random. Insistent. Deliberate. Marcus's eyes lifted slowly, the way a man lifts his eyes when he already knows he won't like what he sees. There she was, Lily, hand pressed to the glass, breath-creating fog that bloomed and vanished in weak bursts. Her hair was damp, her cheeks raw from cold. The thin coat he'd seen before seemed even thinner tonight, as if the weather had finally exposed how little protection she had. But she wasn't just watching anymore. She was trying to get his attention, and she wasn't afraid of him. Their eyes met. Lily didn't look away. Marcus felt his stomach tighten not with hunger, but with something that had nothing to do with food, something primal, like being spotted. Lily lifted a piece of wrinkled paper to the glass, pressing it flat with both hands, like she wanted to make sure he could read it clearly. Careful handwriting, uneven but determined. Please help her. Marcus's chest tightened. Anger arrived first, as it always did. Anger was safe. Anger was a wall. Of course, he thought. Of course. This is what it is. The ask. The con. The performance finally reaching its final scene. Money. Always money. He stared at the words for a beat too long, then forced his eyes down to his plate. He shook his head once, a small, dismissive movement. No. He turned back to his food like the decision was simple. Like he wasn't a man being interrupted by a child, holding a sign like a knife. But Lily didn't leave. She pressed harder against the glass, as if her small hands could break the barrier between their worlds. She mouthed words he couldn't hear, but he could read them anyway. Please, please, please. Tears gathered in her eyes and clung to her lashes, making them glitter under the restaurant's light. Other diners started noticing. A woman at a nearby table turned her head, eyebrows lifting. A man followed her gaze. Someone else leaned closer to the window, curiosity sharpening. A phone appeared, someone filming, because that was what people did now when they saw pain. They recorded it. They consumed it. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. Not embarrassment. Not guilt. Irritation. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. His dinner was supposed to be private, even in public. His loneliness was supposed to be controlled, elegant, untouchable. And Lily was dragging it into the open, where strangers could stare at it. The mater d' noticed the attention and moved toward the entrance, phone already in hand. His expression said, "We can remove the problem." M.R. Thorne. Marcus understood what was happening in real time. He had two choices: have her removed, return to comfort, return to silence, return to the empty chair and the predictable routine and the illusion that isolation was strength. Or do something he hadn't done in 23 years. Stand up, walk outside, ask a child what she wanted. It terrified him more than he wanted to admit. Not because he feared danger. He feared involvement. He feared being pulled into a story that required him to feel something, to be responsible, to care. Because caring meant losing control. And losing control was the doorway betrayal walked through. Marcus stared at his plate, at the steak he couldn't taste, at the wine he didn't enjoy, and he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to realize in decades. He was tired. Not tired like sleepy, tired like hollow. Tired of the empty chair. Tired of the performance. Tired of pretending the glass box was a throne and not a prison. His body moved before his mind could argue. Marcus stood. The chair scraped back, the sound loud, ripping through the soft piano. People looked. They always looked. Marcus Thorne never left before finishing. Never. In 23 years, the staff had never seen him rise mid-meal. Investors had waited for him. Presidents had waited for him. He finished his dinner, and then he moved. But tonight, he dropped his napkin onto the table like it was suddenly meaningless. He didn't even take his coat. He pushed through the restaurant toward the door. Every eye tracked him. Some faces were curious. Some were smug. Some were surprised, like they were watching a rare animal step out of its cage. The mater d' stepped toward him quickly. "Mar. Thorne, would you like me to—" "No," Marcus said without looking at him. One word. Final. The mater d' stopped, frozen in confusion. The staff had scripts for everything. They did not have a script for Marcus Thorne choosing discomfort. Marcus pushed the door open. A cold hit him like a slap. It wasn't just cold. It was wet and sharp and immediate, like the air itself wanted to punish him for stepping out of luxury. His shirt collar soaked instantly. Rain dotted his hair and slid down his face. His shoes, perfect leather, met dirty sidewalk water. He didn't care. Not yet. Lily stood close, clutching the paper like it was the only weapon she had. Up close, Marcus could see details he hadn't seen from inside. How thin she was. How her sleeves were too short. How her coat was held together with safety pins. How her shoes had holes stuffed with newspaper. Her lips were tinged blue. Her whole body trembled, not theatrically, but uncontrollably. She'd been out here too long. This was dangerous. Marcus felt another sensation rise, one he didn't want. concern. It irritated him because it made him human. "What do you want?" he snapped, harsher than he meant, because he needed the sharpness to keep himself protected. Lily flinched at his tone but didn't step back. She swallowed hard, her breath puffing in the air. "I need help," she said, voice shaking. "But not for me." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Money. You want money." "No," Lily said immediately, panic in her voice, like being accused of that was worse than being cold. "No, I need food, real food, but I can't pay. I can't steal. My mom taught me stealing is wrong, even when you're hungry." Marcus stared at her, irritated by the way her words landed differently than he expected. "So you want me to steal it?" he said, sarcasm like a shield. "No." Lily's throat tightened. She blinked hard, forcing herself not to cry. "My mom is sick, really sick. She can't walk because of a car accident. And she can't eat our food because her medicine makes her sick. But I saw someone get French onion soup in there." She nodded toward the glowing restaurant behind him. "And my mom told me her grandma used to make that. She said it was the best thing she ever tasted. She told me once when we still had good days." Marcus's jaw tightened. The manipulation, he thought, the emotional hook. A story with nostalgia and sadness wrapped around it like ribbon. He'd heard versions of it before. "So you want me to buy your mother's soup," he thought, the sentence forming in his mind like an accusation. And Lily did say it, but she said it wrong. "Not buy," she rushed, as if she could feel his assumption. She dug into her coat and pulled out a crumpled envelope, shaking hands, spilling out wrinkled singles and quarters. Wet coins glinted under the streetlight. "I have money." "Not enough, but I could pay you back. I collect cans, 5 cents each." I could. Her voice cracked. Marcus looked down at the money. It wasn't pathetic. It was fierce. It was everything she had, and she was offering it like it mattered. He felt something in his chest shift, subtle but real. "Stop," Marcus said, not loudly, but with a firmness that cut through her frantic explanation. Lily froze, terrified he was going to walk away. Marcus exhaled, rain in his eyelashes. He wanted to be done with this. He wanted to turn back into Aurelio, let the warmth swallow him, let the modernity handle it, let his routine stitch the world back into place. But his eyes kept returning to Lily's face. She wasn't performing. She wasn't charming. She wasn't flattering him or begging him. She looked determined and exhausted. "Why me?" Marcus asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. It was the real question, the one that mattered. Why him? Lily looked down. Her shoulders sagged for a second, like the weight of answering felt heavier than the cold. "Because you're always alone," she whispered. Marcus stiffened. The words felt like a slap because they were true. "I thought maybe you'd understand," Lily added softly. "Understand what?" Marcus demanded, but his voice wasn't as sharp now. Lily lifted her eyes again, and they were too old for her face. "What it's like to eat by yourself," she said. "To want someone to share it with?" Marcus's throat tightened. He almost laughed, bitterly, because the absurdity of it was unbearable. A 10-year-old was explaining loneliness to a billionaire like it was science. "You have all that food," Lily continued, nodding toward the restaurant behind him, "and all those people. But you look like the loneliest person I've ever seen." Marcus felt something crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but like ice giving way under pressure. For 2 decades, he'd kept himself frozen on purpose. Frozen people didn't bleed. Frozen people didn't break. But Lily's words didn't hit his ego. They hit the empty chair. They hit the nights in the penthouse with the TV on just for voices. They hit the birthdays no one remembered. They hit the truth he refused to name. Isolation wasn't strength. It was slow starvation. Marcus stared at her. Rain poured off the edge of the restaurant awning nearby, splashing onto the sidewalk like time running out. "What's your mother's name?" he asked, his voice lower now, more controlled. Lily blinked, surprised by the shift. "Sarah," she said quickly. "Sarah Collins. And you're Lily?" She nodded, startled that he remembered. Marcus looked at the envelope again, the wet money, the desperate dignity of it. He made a decision that made no sense to the man he used to be. "I'm not taking your money," Marcus said. Lily's eyes widened. "But because that's not how this works," Marcus interrupted. He hated how tender his voice wanted to become, so he made it firm again. "I'll get your mother's soup." Lily let out a shaky breath like she'd been holding it for days. "But," Marcus added, and Lily froze again. "I want to meet her first." Lily's smile faltered. "Meet her?" "I want to see where you live," Marcus said. The words sounded insane the moment he said them, but he didn't take them back. "I want to understand the situation." Lily stared at him like he'd just offered to step onto the moon. "Why?" she whispered. Marcus looked at the warm light behind the restaurant window, the comfort, the safety, the life he'd designed so no one could reach him. Then he looked at Lily's thin coat, her shaking hands, her eyes full of stubborn hope. "Because I don't do anything halfway," Marcus said, as if that was the reason. As if this was business. As if structure could protect him from feeling. "If I'm helping, I'm doing it right. Take it or leave it." Lily's mouth opened slightly. "You want to come to our apartment? Is that a problem?" Marcus asked. Lily shook her head quickly, panic rising. "No. It's not very nice. It's actually pretty terrible. And I don't care," Marcus said, and he surprised himself because he meant it. There was a pause where the city seemed to hold its breath. Cars hissed through wet streets. People inside Aurelio watched through the glass, pretending not to. Lily looked like she was deciding whether to trust him. Marcus realized he was doing the same. "When?" Marcus asked. Lily hesitated, then whispered, "Now?" Marcus glanced back through the window. His unfinished meal sat there, perfectly plated. His routine waited like a chain. The empty chair across from his place looked back at him, familiar and cold. He should go back in. He should finish. He should leave and return to his penthouse and pretend this was a strange interruption. But he thought of Lily standing in rain for 2 weeks, not asking for money, not asking for herself, just trying to help someone she loved. And he thought, with a strange, uncomfortable clarity, if a child could be that brave, what was his excuse? Marcus nodded once, decisive. "Now," he said. Lily's face changed instantly. Relief, disbelief, a fragile joy that looked too big for her small body. "Okay," she said quickly, already turning. "Okay, come on. It's not too far. We can walk." Marcus blinked at the word. Walk. He hadn't walked anywhere meaningful in years. "Shouldn't I call my driver?" He heard himself ask, the old Marcus trying to reassert control. Lily shook her head. "It'll make it weird." Weird. Marcus almost laughed. Everything about this was already weird. But he let her lead. And with every step away from Aurelio, away from table 17, away from the empty chair, Marcus Thorne felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt like he was crossing a line. Not a physical line. A line inside himself. A line that said, "You don't go there. You don't get involved. You don't open the glass." But his feet kept moving, and the rain kept falling. And for the first time in 23 years, Marcus Thorne wasn't thinking about what he was losing. He was wondering what he might finally gain. "I see you at County General," Sarah continued. 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16. I was good at it. I saved people. I held hands when families couldn't. I talked to patients who couldn't talk back. I knew how to stay walked. Lily said calling his car would make it weird, and Marcus, against every instinct he had cultivated for decades, didn't argue. Normally, he traveled like a moving fortress. Driver, security, tinted windows. Routes planned in advance. The city was something he observed through glass, not something he touched. But tonight, he was out in it. The rain hit his face. The cold crawled under his collar. His shoes, built for marble floors and carpeted hallways, soaked through at the seams. Marcus could feel the wetness in his socks, an irritation so small it almost made him laugh at himself. He had spent millions to avoid discomfort like this. And yet, walking beside a 10-year-old who had been living in discomfort her entire life, he felt a kind of shame he didn't know where to place. Lily moved fast, as if speed could keep them safe. She didn't hold his hand or ask if he was okay. She simply assumed he could keep up, which was both insulting and strangely respectful. Marcus kept his shoulders squared. He didn't want to look like a man who could be hunted. Still, he couldn't stop noticing the way the street changed as they walked. At first, it was simply quieter. Fewer caxes, fewer doormen, fewer people laughing outside lit restaurant entrances. The buildings lost their polish. The sidewalk lost its smoothness. Then it became darker. Street lights flickered. Some were out completely. The puddles weren't just rainwater. They carried oil and trash, and the dull sheen of neglect. The air smelled like wet concrete, stale smoke, and something metallic that reminded Marcus of old subway stations. The neighborhood degraded one block at a time, as if the city had decided that its beauty was a privilege, not a promise. Marcus had lived here 40 years. He knew every luxury hotel, every five-star restaurant, every private club where deals were made under soft lighting. He had never walked these streets. He caught people watching him. Men on corners, teenagers under awnings, a woman smoking by a boarded storefront. Their eyes tracked him like sensors. The suit, the watch, the posture that didn't belong here. Marcus's body reacted instinctively. He felt the old businessman's calculation kick in. Risk, probability, exposure. He was worth money. He looked like money. And in places like this, money did not walk without consequence. But Lily walked through like she owned the sidewalk. Not arrogantly, naturally. She nodded at a man under a doorway. The man nodded back. Someone called her name from across the street, and Lily lifted her hand in a small wave, like she had roots here. "This is my neighborhood," Lily said suddenly, as if she could feel Marcus's silence judging it. Her chin lifted. "It's not as bad as it looks." Marcus didn't respond, because it was worse. But he also saw something else. A kind of community he didn't recognize. People looked out for each other in quiet, unofficial ways. A teenager stepped aside to let Lily pass without bumping her. A woman by a shop entrance adjusted Lily's hood without asking. A man muttered something that sounded like, "You good?" And Lily answered, "Yeah." It wasn't safety in the way Marcus understood safety. It was survival woven into routine. They stopped at a building that looked like it had been tired for decades. Once red brick, now darkened into the color of old blood. The front door hung crooked, one hinge complaining. A cracked window was taped in a spiderweb of plastic. The entry buzzer panel was missing half its buttons. Lily looked up at Marcus, like she was bracing for him to turn around. "This is it," she said. Then, quickly, defensively, "The elevator's broken. 4th floor. Can you do stairs?" Marcus stared at the stairwell entrance. He could almost smell it already. "I can do stairs," he said. Lily pushed the door open. The lobby smell hit Marcus like a physical thing. Urine, mold, old smoke. A sourness that suggested hopelessness had soaked into the walls. His throat tightened. He told himself he'd been in worse places for business deals overseas. But those places had been temporary. This was someone's home. Lily moved forward without hesitation, stepping around a broken bottle as casually as she stepped around puddles. Marcus followed. The stairwell was worse. Holes in the walls, missing railings. A faint dripping sound from somewhere above, steady like a slow leak that no one bothered fixing anymore. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything went dim enough that Marcus's heart gave a small, involuntary jump. 3rd floor. A man slept against the wall, slumped sideways, bottle in hand. Marcus's body tensed automatically. Lily stepped over him like he was furniture. "That's Mir Peterson," she said, almost conversational. "He's nice when he's sober." Marcus stared at the man's shoes worn to the shape of his feet, the laces mismatched, the soles peeling. He looked like someone who had been losing for a long time. Lily didn't look afraid of him. She looked used to him. 4th floor. Apartment 4C. The number hung upside down, as if even the building couldn't keep its identity straight. The door had 3 locks, each one thick and serious. Lily's hand hovered over the keys, like she was suddenly nervous. "Please don't judge us," she said quietly. "Mom does her best." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't trust his voice. Lily unlocked the 1st lock, and the 2nd, then the 3rd. Each click sounded loud in the stairwell. Then she pushed the door open. The apartment was smaller than Marcus's closet. It was 300 square feet of stubborn dignity. 1 room, a threadbare couch, a mini-fridge humming, a small table with 1 chair missing a leg, propped up with medical textbooks. A space heater glowed orange, working too hard. The windows were covered in plastic for insulation, taped at the edges like makeshift armor against winter. Everything was spotless. Not rich spotless, desperate spotless. The kind of clean that says, "You can't take my pride." Photos were taped to the walls. Lily as a baby. Sarah in a nurse's uniform, smiling, eyes bright. A picture of Lily and Sarah in what looked like a park, both laughing, both looking like life had once been lighter. Marcus's chest tightened at the photos more than the smell of the stairwell. Lily stepped inside and called, "Mom?" The bedroom door opened. Sarah Collins appeared, leaning on a walking stick. 35, but looking older. Gaunt, gray at the temples. Sweatpants hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight it couldn't afford to lose. Every movement looked like it cost her something. But her eyes were sharp, professional. The eyes of someone who had once looked at monitors and vital signs and understood immediately when a body was failing. Those eyes went from Lily to Marcus. Recognition flickered. Sarah's face went pale. "Lily," Sarah said, voice tight with fear. "What did you do?" Lily's shoulders lifted defensively. "I'm sorry, Mom, but you brought him here." Sarah's gaze snapped back to Marcus, anger rising like a shield. "You're him, the man from the restaurant." Lily nodded quickly. "Yes, but I wasn't begging." Sarah's voice sharpened. "We don't ask for help. We don't beg. I wasn't begging." Lily's voice cracked. "I wanted to get you soup. You haven't eaten in 3 days." "We are fine," Sarah said, too quickly, too firmly, like she could speak it into truth. Marcus looked around. The plastic-covered windows. The space heater. The empty fridge he could see when Lily's body shifted. A cluster of medication bottles on a shelf. An eviction notice pinned to the fridge door. Edges curled. Fine. He knew what fine looked like. Fine was a lie people told when they had no other defense. Sarah turned fully to Marcus, forcing her voice into something polite through sheer will. "I apologize for my daughter," she said. "Mr. Thorne," Marcus replied. Marcus Thorne. The name hung in the air like a weight. Sarah's eyes widened by a fraction. Everyone knew Marcus Thorne. His face was in articles, business magazines, charity galas he didn't attend, but funded for reputation. There was a new kind of tension now. Not just anger, awareness, power imbalance. Sarah straightened slightly, like she needed to protect Lily from the fact that a billionaire stood in their living room. "We don't need anything," Sarah said quickly. "We're managing. Lily shouldn't have bothered you." Marcus stared at her. "You're not fine," he said. Sarah's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "Mom," Lily whispered, desperate. Sarah's eyes flashed toward Lily. "Go to your room, Lily." "Now." Lily froze, eyes filling, then turned and disappeared into the bedroom, the thin door closing behind her. Marcus heard her sob through the wall, almost immediately. The walls were too thin for privacy. Sarah stood in the living room, gripping her stick like a weapon, face hard with pride. "We don't need your pity," she said. "You can leave." Marcus didn't move. Something in him had become stubborn in a different way now. "When did you last eat a full meal?" he asked. Sarah's face tightened. "That's... When did you last take your medication without choosing between pills and food?" Marcus continued, voice low but controlled. "When did you last sleep without worrying if the heat would shut off?" Sarah's breathing changed. For a second, something broke through her anger, fear, exhaustion, humiliation. Then she rebuilt the wall instantly. "Get out?" she hissed. Marcus surprised them both by saying, "No." The word landed heavy. Sarah stared. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Marcus repeated, quieter now, as if lowering his voice could make the situation less dangerous. "Not yet." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You don't get to say no in my home." Marcus took a slow breath. The old him would have backed away the moment resistance appeared. The old him would have returned to his penthouse and written a check to charity to wash the feeling off. But Lily's crying behind the door wouldn't let him pretend this was abstract. "Your daughter stood in the rain for 2 weeks," Marcus said, "trying to help you. The least you can do is let someone actually try." Sarah's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Try? People like you don't try. You donate, you leave, you move on." "I don't want your money," Sarah added instantly, like she needed to claim that before he could offer it. "Good," Marcus said. "Because I'm not offering money." Sarah blinked, thrown off. Marcus looked around again. The reality of the room was louder than any argument. "Your daughter asked me why I eat alone every night," Marcus continued. "I didn't have a good answer." Sarah's grip tightened on her stick. "That's not my problem." "No," Marcus admitted. "But maybe I'm tired of not having one." Sarah studied his face like she was reading a patient, searching for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden camera, the lie. "Then what are you offering?" she asked, suspicious. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He heard Lily sobbing. He saw the medication bottles. He saw the eviction notice. He saw Sarah's pride, clinging to dignity like it was the last thing she owned. "I'm offering soup," Marcus said finally. "Tonight, French onion soup, from Aurelio, delivered." Sarah's face hardened again. "I told you. We don't take charity." "It's not charity," Marcus said, and he realized he needed that to be true. "It's a meal. One meal. And there's a condition. Double quotes. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Of course there is. The condition is," Marcus said, "you let me think about whether there's anything else I can do. Not money, not a handout, something real. You don't have to accept anything. I'm not making promises. But you let me consider it. You let me understand." Sarah stared at him, throat working as if she wanted to spit out a dozen arguments. "Why would you care?" she demanded. "We're nothing to you." Marcus swallowed. The simplest answer was, "I don't know." The truth was uglier, because I'm emptier than I look. But he couldn't say that yet. Instead, he said, your daughter was brave enough to knock on my window. I don't respect myself enough to pretend that didn't matter. Sarah's face softened for half a second, then tightened again like she was angry at herself for feeling anything. Fine, Sarah said finally, voice clipped. One meal. The soup. Then you leave. Marcus nodded. Deal. He pulled out his phone and called Aurelio. The host answered with the smooth voice of someone trained to sound honored. M.R. Thorne. I need a to-go order, Marcus said. Your best French onion soup. Whatever is good tonight. Enough for 3 people. Sarah's eyes flashed. 3? Marcus ignored it and looked at Sarah. Address? Sarah hesitated, pride fighting reality, then gave it quietly. Like admitting an address was admitting defeat. 30 minutes, the host promised. We'll make it perfect. Marcus ended the call. Silence fell. The apartment's sounds filled it. The hum of the mini-fridge, the faint drip somewhere, muffled voices from neighbors, the city pressing in through thin walls. Sarah lowered herself to the couch with visible pain, carefully, as if her body was a fragile machine. Marcus sat on the wobbly chair opposite her, knees too close to the table. It was uncomfortable in every way. And somehow, it felt more real than his entire penthouse. Sarah stared at him like he was a mistake that hadn't left yet. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. I was a nurse, she said, voice quieter now. Before, Marcus nodded slowly. Lily said. Sarah's eyes flicked toward Lily's door. Her expression tightened, then softened, then tightened again. Stay calm when everything was falling apart. Her laugh was bitter. Then some drunk driver ran a red light at 3 a.m. T-boned me. I woke up in the same ICU where I used to work. Marcus listened. Sarah told him about the surgeries. 4 of them. The recovery that never became recovery. The pain that made walking feel like punishment. The medical bills that stacked like bricks until her life collapsed under them. Bankruptcy. A husband who left when the future stopped looking convenient. A system that failed her with paperwork and waiting lists and rejection letters. How do you keep going? Marcus asked quietly, and he realized he wasn't asking for business inspiration. He was asking because he genuinely couldn't understand it. Sarah looked toward Lily's door, eyes shining with something that wasn't weakness. Because she needs me, Sarah said. And because giving up isn't an option when someone's counting on you. A knock sounded at the door. Professional. Precise. Lily's sobbing stopped instantly. Sarah stiffened. Marcus stood and opened the door. 2 men in crisp uniforms entered carrying silver domes, bags, and a kind of careful respect that looked surreal in this hallway. Pierre and Antoine, as the restaurant staff had introduced themselves at Aurelio, moved as if they were setting a table inside a palace, not a crumbling apartment. They laid down placemats, bowls, bread, utensils, even folded napkins. Aurelio care. Aurelio dignity. Sarah stared as if the meal might vanish if she blinked too hard. This is too much, she whispered. It's soup, Marcus said, but his voice wasn't dismissive now. It was almost gentle, which frightened him. The bedroom door opened, and Lily stepped out cautiously, face blotchy from crying. Her eyes went wide when she saw the setup. For a second, she looked like she didn't believe in miracles. Then she looked at Marcus like he had done something holy. Sarah took a spoonful of the soup, and she started crying. Not loud crying. Quiet tears slipping down her face as if her body didn't have energy for dramatics. It tastes like... Sarah's voice cracked. My grandma? Lily sat down, hands folded, waiting like she'd been taught manners even when hungry. They ate together. Marcus ate too, not because he wanted soup, but because he didn't want them to feel watched. He noticed Lily chew slowly, like she was making the food last. He noticed Sarah's hands tremble slightly. He noticed the way the warmth in the room, seemed to change the air itself. Walls were cracking. Not Sarah's walls. His. When the meal ended, Lily looked up at Marcus with a directness that made him feel exposed. "Are you coming back?" she asked. Marcus knew the correct answer. No. No was safe. No would restore the world to its proper shape. But he couldn't make the word come out. "I don't know," he said. Lily didn't seem discouraged. She nodded like that was enough. "And I'll be outside tomorrow," she said simply. "Because nobody should eat alone every night." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Sarah watched him carefully. She had seen 1,000 kinds of men in hospitals. Men who promised things. Men who performed kindness. Men who wanted to be praised. Marcus didn't look like any of them right now. He looked like a man who didn't know what he was doing, but couldn't stop. "I'm not a good person," Marcus said suddenly, as if confession could protect him from expectation. "I'm cold. Selfish. I spent 20 years making sure I don't need anyone." "Then why are you still here?" Sarah asked, quieter now, not accusing, just curious. Marcus didn't have an answer. So he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. "If you need anything," he said, placing it on the table. "Medical, landlord, anything. Call my assistant." Sarah's eyes flicked to the card. Thorne. You were a nurse," Marcus interrupted, voice firmer now, like he needed to control the moment before emotion swallowed him. "You saved lives. Someone should have saved yours." Sarah's throat tightened. Marcus stood. At the door, he paused and looked at Lily. "If you're outside tomorrow," Marcus said, voice stirred again, "I'm calling the police." Lily's face fell instantly, hope collapsing. Marcus held the pause just long enough for her to feel it. Then he added, "But if you want to come inside and sit at table 17, I'll have them set 2 places." Lily's eyes went wide. Sarah stared. The offer wasn't just soup. It wasn't just help. It was a crack in the glass. Marcus left, down the stairs, past M.R. Peterson, back into the cold. A car pulled up like it had been tracking him, his driver stepping out fast, worry in his face. "Sir, home," Marcus said. He climbed into the car, wet and quiet, and watched the building disappear behind rain. Back in his penthouse, the silence greeted him like an old enemy. His phone buzzed, a new message. From Sarah. She must have found his number through the card, through the assistant, through whatever thin thread she could use. The text read, "She won't believe you're really coming. But I hope you prove her wrong. Thank you." Marcus stared at the screen. He saved the contact before he could overthink it. Then he typed back, fingers moving with a certainty that startled him. "I keep my promises. See you Thursday." 6 p.m. He hit send before fear could take it back. For the first time in 23 years, Marcus Thorne felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Something smaller. Something dangerous. He was looking forward to something. Thursday came slowly. Like the week itself, knew Marcus Thorne was about to do something irrational. For 23 years, Marcus's life had been built on a single obsession. Control. Control over his money, his schedule, his exposure, his emotions. He controlled his environment the way other people controlled their breathing without thinking, without stopping, without ever allowing himself to wonder what would happen if he didn't. But now, a 10-year-old girl with wet shoes and stubborn eyes had forced a crack in that structure. And cracks had a way of spreading. Marcus didn't sleep well after the night in apartment 4C. Not because he was scared of danger. Because he was scared of meaning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily shaking hands holding that envelope of quarters and damp bills. He heard her voice saying, "Nobody should eat alone every night." It wasn't the words that haunted him. It was how true they were. So Marcus did what he always did when he felt something he didn't understand. He got to work. Thursday dinner was set for 6 p.m. By Monday morning, Marcus had already made more phone calls for Sarah Collins than anyone had made for him when his life collapsed. He sat in his penthouse office marble desk, glass walls, city view, looking at notes he'd written by hand, as if handwriting made this feel more real. He called Alan Chun first, a disability lawyer with a reputation for winning impossible cases. Alan answered on the second ring, voice cautious. Marcus Thorne. This is unexpected. I need a favor, Marcus said, tone flat enough to sound like business. A woman. Sarah Collins. Injured in a car accident. Medical bills buried her. She needs disability, appeals, the whole thing. Alan exhaled slowly. Those cases take time. A lot of time. I'm aware. And money. Marcus's mouth tightened. Pro bono. There was a pause. Marcus could almost hear Alan's brain calculating the headline potential, the social value, the networking opportunities. Marcus hated that part. But he didn't care. He wanted results. Alan cleared his throat. Send me the details. I'll prioritize it. Today, Marcus said. I want the first paperwork filed by the end of the week. Alan chuckled once, a sound half amused, half nervous. You're still you. Marcus ended the call without responding. Next, he called Dr. Jennifer Walsh, pain management specialist. Brilliant. Overbooked. Known for turning away rich patients who treated her like a luxury service. His assistant, Sandra, got Dr. Walsh on the line after 3 tries. Dr. Walsh sounded skeptical. Thorne, if this is for you, I'm booked for months. It's not for me, Marcus said. It's for a woman who can't walk without a cane. She's 35 and looks 50. She used to be an ICU nurse, doctor. Walsh was quiet for a beat. Marcus continued before she could refuse. She's been suffering for 3 years. She's losing weight because food makes her sick with medication. She's trapped in a 4th-floor apartment with a broken elevator. Doctor. Walsh's voice softened slightly. I can make room next week. Thank you, Marcus said. He almost added something human. He didn't. Then came the building. Marcus contacted a real estate attorney, an aggressive one, the kind who loved tearing down landlords with code violations. Within 24 hours, an investigator was in the building documenting everything. Broken elevator, missing railings, unsafe wiring, mold, cracked windows, heating failures. 47 violations. The attorney sent Marcus a draft lawsuit by Tuesday morning. The landlord's name was printed in bold at the top like a target. Marcus read it once and signed. He didn't feel proud. He felt angry. Not the old anger that protected him. A different anger. The kind that came from realizing he had lived for decades in a city where suffering like Sarah's was invisible until it annoyed someone rich enough to see it. Next, Lily. Marcus researched gifted programs like he researched acquisitions. He looked at test requirements, scholarship options, application deadlines. He found programs that could change Lily's entire future advanced science camps, STEM academies, mentorship networks. He contacted directors. Every call went the same way. At first, confusion, then recognition, then sudden enthusiasm. We would be honored to consider Miss Collins. Marcus didn't say consider. He didn't say maybe. He said full scholarship, and they agreed. By Wednesday, Marcus had built a roadmap for Sarah and Lily that looked like a rescue plan. Not with pity, with structure, a ladder. And then, as the practical tasks got checked off, something uncomfortable replaced the urgency. Fear. Not fear of failure. Fear of the dinner. Thursday dinner at 6 p.m. He had told Sarah. He had promised Lily. Promises were dangerous. Promises created expectations. Expectations created relationships. Relationships created loss. Marcus stood in his dressing room Thursday afternoon staring at shirts. He owned dozens, all expensive, all perfect. He changed his shirt 3 times anyway. Sandra stood at the doorway with a folder in hand, watching him with the quiet curiosity of someone who had worked for him long enough to recognize when he was lying to himself. "You're scared," she said. Marcus paused. "I'm not scared." Sandra raised one eyebrow. "You've changed your shirt 3 times. Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm going to dinner." "With who?" Sandra asked. Marcus hated the way her tone made this sound like gossip, like something cute. "A woman and her daughter," he said, forcing it to sound like normal business. "I'm bringing dessert." Sandra's expression shifted into something Marcus rarely saw directed at him. "Warmth. Friends?" she said. Marcus didn't respond fast enough. Sandra smiled like she had just witnessed something historic. "You're scared because you care," she said gently. "That means you're doing it right." Marcus hated that his throat tightened at her words. He turned away like he didn't hear her. Sandra disappeared for a moment and returned holding a small container. "Chocolate chip cookies," she said. "Homemade. Not from Aurelio. Not from a fancy bakery. Just normal." Marcus stared at them. Normal. He hadn't eaten anything normal in years. "Why?" he asked. Sandra shrugged. "Because if you show up with a dessert that costs $100, it makes it weird, right?" Marcus almost smiled. Almost. He took the cookies. At 5:40, Marcus's driver took him across town. He sat in the back seat, watching the city blur by. The further they drove, the less polished the streets became. Marcus's stomach tightened as if his body remembered the stairwell smell. The flickering lights, the way Lily's building seemed to lean under its own weight. When the car stopped, his driver looked at him in the rearview mirror. "Sir, do you want me to wait?" Marcus hesitated. Waiting meant a quick exit. Waiting meant safety. "No," Marcus said. "Go." His driver looked surprised, but obeyed. Marcus stood alone on the sidewalk in his expensive coat, holding a container of homemade cookies like it was contraband. He walked into the building. The lobby smell hit him again. He climbed the stairs. By the 2nd floor, his legs felt the effort. He had a personal trainer. He worked out. But this wasn't a gym. This was real stairs. Real wear. Real life. 3rd floor, mister. Peterson was awake this time, sitting against the wall with his bottle beside him like a companion. He looked up at Marcus with bloodshot eyes. Marcus stiffened, instinctively guarding his watch. But Mr. Peterson's gaze slid past Marcus to the cookie container, then to Marcus's face. "You lost?" Mr. Peterson muttered. "No," Marcus said. "Mr." Peterson snorted, amused. "You look lost." Marcus didn't respond. 4th floor. Apartment 4C. Before Marcus knocked, the door swung open. Lily stood there in her best dress, too small, too old, like it had been saved from a past life. Her hair was brushed neatly. Her face was clean. She had tried very hard to look like this mattered, because it did. Her eyes went wide when she saw him. "You came," she whispered, like she still couldn't believe a billionaire could keep his word. "I said I would," Marcus replied. Lily stepped back quickly, gesturing him inside with a flourish that looked like she'd learned it from movies. The apartment smelled different tonight. Not cleaner, Sarah always kept it clean, but warmer. There was garlic in the air, tomato, something baking. A small candle flickered on the table like a quiet declaration. This is a real dinner. Sarah emerged from the bedroom, wearing clothes that were clearly her best. Not expensive, but chosen with care. Her hair was pulled back, her face more composed than the last time Marcus saw her. But the fatigue was still there. Pain lived in her posture. "You really came," Sarah said, voice cautious. Marcus held up the cookie container. "Dessert," Sarah blinked, thrown off by the simplicity. Lily leaned closer, sniffed, and her face lit up. "Cookies." Sarah's lips twitched almost a smile. "Come sit," she said, gesturing toward the table. The table wobbled slightly when Marcus touched it. He sat anyway. Sarah served dinner. Boxed pasta, jar sauce, day-old bread warmed in the oven. Nothing like Aurelio. No plated art, no garnish, no wine list. And yet, Marcus felt something in his chest soften. Because this dinner was made with effort, not money. And no one was treating him like a revenue stream. No one was flattering him. No one was performing. They ate. At first, conversation was stiff. Lily talked about school, about a science assignment, about how she wanted to visit the museum downtown because there was an exhibit on space research and medicine. Sarah asked Marcus polite questions about work, as if she needed to keep things in the safe category. Marcus answered with more honesty than he expected. He found himself listening more than speaking. Then Lily looked at him and said bluntly, "Can I ask you something?" Sarah immediately said, "Lily," in warning. Marcus surprised them both by saying, "Yes." Lily tilted her head. "Why did your wife leave you?" Sarah's face went white. Marcus felt the old reflex rise. Shut down, deflect, control. But Lily's eyes weren't nosy. They were genuinely curious. So Marcus answered, "She betrayed me," he said simply. "She and my business partner. They were having an affair. They stole from my company." Lily's face tightened, processing. "That's sad," Lily said. Then she frowned, like she was thinking hard. "But they were bad people." Marcus blinked. Lily continued, voice steady. "It doesn't mean everyone is bad. You decided everyone was bad because two people were." Marcus stared at her. Then Lily said something that hit harder than any therapist ever had. "That's like saying all experiments fail because one failed." Silence. Sarah stared at her daughter like she had just spoken adult language. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Because Lily was right. He had built a life around a false conclusion. He had made betrayal into a permanent law of humanity. Marcus let out a slow breath. "You're right," he admitted. Lily nodded, satisfied. "You stopped trying," she said. "That's not scientific." Marcus's mouth tightened, but there was no anger behind it now. "That's scared," Lily added softly. Marcus looked down at his plate. For a moment, he couldn't speak. And he looked up again. "But you're trying now," Lily said, as if she could read his silence. "This is an experiment. And it's working." Sarah laughed suddenly. A real laugh, surprised out of her. "My daughter, the scientist." After dinner, Marcus expected the usual end. Polite goodbye, quick exit, return to his quiet life. But Lily looked at him with that same stubbornness he'd seen through glass. "You could stay," she offered. "Watch a movie." Marcus hesitated. Stay meant intimacy. Stay meant he couldn't pretend this was a charity visit. Stay meant he'd have to be a person in a room with other people. Sarah watched him, guarded, as if she expected him to decline. And Marcus realized something uncomfortable. He didn't want to leave. His penthouse would be waiting with silence and expensive emptiness. Here, the air was thin, but it was alive. "Actually," Marcus heard himself say, "I'd like that." Lily's grin was immediate, radiant. She squeezed onto the couch first. Marcus sat carefully, the couch creaking under his weight. Sarah sat at the edge, trying not to show fatigue. The TV was small and old, the sound a little distorted. The documentary they watched wasn't even that interesting something about ocean exploration. But Marcus found himself watching Lily more than the screen. She laughed at small moments. She pointed out things she found fascinating. She leaned into Sarah occasionally, as if checking she was okay. Halfway through, Lily's head slowly tipped onto Marcus's shoulder. Marcus froze. Her weight was light, too light. Her trust was heavy. Sarah noticed immediately. Her eyes softened, and she whispered so quietly, Marcus almost didn't hear. She hasn't done that since before the accident. Marcus swallowed. He looked down at Lily asleep against him, mouth slightly open, eyelashes wet from earlier tears. He felt a strange ache in his chest, something like grief for the life he'd refused. Sarah turned the TV volume down a little. Marcus took a breath and said quietly, I arranged some help. Sarah stiffened instantly. Thorne. Not money, Marcus said quickly. Practical things. A lawyer, a doctor, programs for Lily, repairs, real support you can refuse. But it exists. Sarah's eyes filled in spite of herself. Why? She whispered. Marcus stared ahead at the TV screen, though he wasn't seeing it. Because if a 10-year-old can be brave, he said slowly, maybe I can too. Sarah's tears fell quietly. Lily stirred, waking slightly. She blinked and looked up at Marcus, like she needed to confirm he was still there. Can we do this again? Lily asked, voice sleepy. Marcus hesitated. Sarah held her breath. Lily added quickly, like family? The word family landed like a bomb in Marcus's chest. Family was the thing he had lost. The thing he had replaced with Table 17 and routine and control. Marcus stared at them. Then he nodded. Yes, he said. I'd like that. Lily's smile returned instantly, even half asleep. Thursday again, she said, already planning. And Saturday, Science Museum? Marcus almost laughed at how quickly she claimed his future. Saturday, he agreed. Sarah looked at him, still cautious, but softer now. You don't have to. I keep my promises, Marcus said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction. On the way out, Sarah walked him to the door with her cane, moving carefully. At the stairwell, she paused. Thank you, Sarah said, voice barely above a whisper. For giving her hope. Marcus swallowed. Thank you, he replied, and he meant it, for letting me be here. He left the building and stepped into the cold again. But this time, it didn't feel like punishment. It felt like proof he was alive. Back at his penthouse, Marcus stood inside his vast living room and noticed something startling. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt empty. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. She's already talking about Saturday like it's Christmas. Don't break her heart. Marcus stared at it. Then he typed back, I won't. Saturday at 10. I'll be there. He hit send. And for the first time in 23 years, Marcus Thorne went to bed not dreading the next day, but anticipating it. The first time Marcus took them to the Science Museum, he tried to pretend it was simple. Just an outing. A promised visit. A small obligation he could check off the list, like a meeting or a charity appearance. But nothing about it was simple. He pulled up in a black car that cost more than most houses, then hesitated when Lily reached for the door handle. Wait, Marcus said. Lily paused, confused. Marcus cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how this looked. His car in her neighborhood. Him stepping out like a symbol. Them being watched. He wasn't used to caring what people thought. Not like this. He stepped out first and scanned the street in old habit, then opened Lily's door himself, offering his hand with an awkwardness that made Sarah's eyes soften. Lily took it like it was normal, like she had always belonged in a man's world. They went to the museum, and Lily moved through it like someone walking inside her future. She darted from exhibit to exhibit, reading plaques out loud, asking questions, explaining theories she had learned at school, like she was teaching Marcus more than she was learning. Sarah walked slower, cane tapping quietly, but her face changed in ways Marcus hadn't expected. Her eyes brightened. Her shoulders loosened. In the museum's clean lighting, she looked younger, not because she wasn't in pain, but because she wasn't drowning in survival for a few hours. At one exhibit, space medicine research and its connection to pain treatments, Lily stopped so suddenly, Marcus almost bumped into her. "Mom," Lily whispered, staring at a display about nerve pathways and microgravity. Sarah leaned closer, reading. Lily looked up at Marcus, eyes shining. "They're using research like this to help people like her," she said. "That's what I want to do." Marcus knelt beside her, though his knees protested. The gesture was instinctive, like his body understood that this moment mattered. "The world needs that," Marcus said quietly. "Scientists who care." Lily blinked. "Is it stupid?" Marcus felt something tighten in his throat. "No," he said. "It's perfect." He didn't say I'll fund it. He didn't say I'll buy it. He said something more dangerous. "I'll help you," Marcus promised, "however I can." "I promise." Lily's smile was so big it looked painful. And Marcus felt the strange stab of realization. Promises were becoming easy, which meant he was no longer thinking like a man, expecting betrayal at every turn. It wasn't overnight. It was gradual. And gradual change was the most unsettling kind, because it was real. Over the next 3 months, Marcus kept showing up. Thursday dinners, Saturday outings, occasional Sunday brunches at places that weren't Aurelio places, where Marcus wasn't a celebrity and Lily could laugh without whispering. Sometimes Marcus ate at table 17, but not alone. And the first time Aurelio set 2 places instead of 1, the staff looked at Marcus like they didn't recognize him. He didn't recognize himself either. Lily sat across from him in the chair that had been empty for 23 years, swinging her legs slightly because her feet didn't reach the floor. Sarah sat beside her, posture careful but present. The room felt different. Not because Aurelio had changed, because Marcus had. At first, Marcus tried to keep it controlled. He'd order Lily something safe from the menu, then realize she wasn't afraid of trying new things. He'd speak too formally, then Lily would laugh and correct him. He'd pay without letting Sarah see the bill. Then Sarah would narrow her eyes and say, "Don't you dare make this feel like charity." So he adjusted. He learned. He listened. And that, more than any phone call or lawsuit, was what cracked his walls open. Sarah's doctor appointments began. Dr. Walsh didn't fix Sarah like magic, but she believed her. She mapped out a plan. She adjusted medications. She offered therapies that treated Sarah like a person, not a problem. For the first time in years, Sarah's pain was acknowledged and addressed instead of dismissed. Lily's scholarship applications went through. When the acceptance letter arrived, Lily held it like it might dissolve in her hands. She read it 3 times, then ran into the kitchen where Sarah was trying not to cry. "We did it," Lily whispered. Marcus watched them and felt a strange heat behind his eyes. He hadn't cried in years. Not even when he lost Catherine. Not even when he lost Richard. Not even when he lost pieces of his company. But now, watching a child hold a letter like it was proof she deserved a future, he felt dangerously close to tears. And that terrified him. Because tears meant he was soft, and softness meant he could be hurt. There were days when Marcus felt the old self return. He'd wake up and feel the familiar urge to retreat, to cancel, to claim he was busy, to rebuild the distance that made him feel safe. He'd stand in his penthouse kitchen, looking at the unused appliances, and hear a voice in his head. "This is temporary. Don't get attached." He almost did it once. He almost canceled a Thursday dinner because a big investor had requested a last-minute meeting. Old Marcus would have chosen the investor without blinking. That meeting meant money, control, power. But then his phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "I saved you the chair, the empty one. It's yours now, ... closing parenthesis. Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he canceled the investor meeting. Not because the investor didn't matter. Because Lily did, and that realization shook him. Because it meant his priorities were changing. A man like Marcus didn't change priorities easily. It cost him something. It felt like death to his old identity. But it also felt like birth. They started eating in different places. Sometimes Aurelio, because Lily liked the fancy desserts, and the waiters were kind to her when Marcus wasn't looking. Sometimes Sarah's apartment, now repaired new locks, working heater, windows sealed properly, elevators scheduled for repair because the lawsuit had forced the landlord's hand. Sometimes Marcus's penthouse, though the first time he invited them, he nearly choked on his own fear. He had said, casually, "You can come over if you want." Sarah had paused. "To your place?" "Yes," Marcus said. "It's big and empty. And I have food I never eat." Lily's eyes had gone huge. A billionaire penthouse? Marcus regretted it immediately, but he didn't take it back. When they arrived, Lily pressed her face against the floor-to-ceiling windows, like she used to press her face against Aurelio's glass. Except now she was inside, and Marcus was beside her. "Look," Lily whispered, pointing to the city lights. "It looks like stars." Sarah stood behind her, quieter, taking in the expensive furniture and the vast silence. "It's beautiful," Sarah said politely. Marcus heard what she didn't say. "It's lonely." He watched Lily run through the rooms, marveling at the echo of her footsteps. Then something happened that Marcus didn't expect. Lily stopped in the dining room. The table seating 12. The table that had never held guests. And Lily looked at him with a seriousness that made the room feel smaller. "Why do you have such a big table if nobody comes?" she asked. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, because any answer he gave would be ugly. Sarah stepped in gently, as if saving him from the question. "Sometimes people buy things hoping their life will match it one day," Sarah said. Marcus swallowed. Lily studied him, then nodded like she understood. Without asking, she pulled out a chair and climbed onto it. Then she dragged another chair toward Marcus's usual seat. The scraping sound echoed like thunder in the empty penthouse. "Sit," Lily said. Marcus sat. And for the first time, that table wasn't a symbol of emptiness. It was a starting point. They started leaving things at Marcus's place. Not expensive things, small things. A sweater Lily forgot on the couch. A book Sarah left on the coffee table. A mug in the sink. Evidence. Evidence that someone had lived here besides Marcus. The first time Marcus saw Lily's sneakers by the door, he almost picked them up and placed them neatly in a closet, like he could hide the reality of belonging. But then Lily ran down the hall laughing, and he left them where they were. Sarah began to move a little easier, not cured, not magically healed, but the pain was managed enough that she could breathe again. She started studying again too, quietly at first. Online courses, notes, the beginnings of a plan. Marcus watched her sit at his kitchen island with textbooks and a laptop and something twisted in his chest. This was a woman who had been broken by the system and still refused to stop becoming. "I never thought I'd go back," Sarah admitted one night, eyes tired. "But Lily, she needs to see me try." "You're more than trying," Marcus said, surprising himself. "You're rebuilding." Sarah looked at him then, like she was seeing the person behind his money for the first time. "And you?" she asked softly. "What are you doing?" Marcus stared at the city beyond the windows. "I don't know," he admitted. "But it feels like I'm remembering something I forgot." Sarah nodded slowly. "How to be human." Marcus didn't argue, because she was right. One Thursday after dinner, Marcus walked them back to their building. The elevator was still broken, but the stairwell had been cleaned a little. The landlord had installed a new light bulb on the 3rd floor. Small changes. Lily bounced up the stairs, talking about a science fair coming up at school. Sarah moved carefully behind her. Marcus followed. When they reached the door, Lily turned to him suddenly. "Thank you for not giving up on us," she said. Marcus froze. His mind searched for a response that didn't expose him. But Lily's eyes weren't demanding. They were grateful. And gratitude, Marcus realized, was another kind of vulnerability. He swallowed. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me." Sarah's face softened. Lily smiled like she'd just won something. And maybe she had. That night, Marcus stood at the window of his penthouse after they left. He looked down at the city. He thought about the man he had been, the man who believed isolation was safety. He had built walls to protect himself from pain, but those walls had also kept out joy. And now, slowly, brick by brick, those walls were coming down. Not because someone forced them, because he was choosing it. And that choice, daily, messy, imperfect, was changing him more than any fortune ever had. 2 years after Lily first knocked on the glass, Marcus Thorne still reserved table 17. The staff kept it ready out of habit and reverence, like the table belonged to him the way a throne belongs to a king. But the habit had changed. Now, whenever Marcus's reservation appeared on the screen, the maître d' would quietly instruct the waiters. Set 3 places, sometimes 4, sometimes 5. Because table 17 was no longer a monument to loneliness. It was a gathering point. On Thursday nights, Aurelia's chandeliers still glowed, the piano still played, the wine still poured. But there was something new in Marcus's corner of the room, something the staff didn't know how to label at first. Laughter. Not polite laughter, not performance. Real laughter. Lily would sit across from Marcus, older now 12, taller, sharper, eyes still bright, but carrying more confidence. She talked science the way other kids talked cartoons. She asked questions about the menu, like she was conducting research. She had a notebook in her backpack with sketches of cells and nerve pathways and ideas for experiments. Sarah would sit beside her, posture stronger now. Not pain-free. Never pain-free, but no longer crushed by it. The pain program helped. The therapy helped. The legal case helped. The stress relief helped. And stress, Marcus had learned, could be its own kind of disease. Sarah looked healthier. Not because life had become easy, but because life was no longer impossible. Her hair had more color again. Her eyes had more light. She laughed more. She spoke about the future without flinching. She was back in school now. A nurse practitioner program. Studying late at Marcus's kitchen island sometimes, surrounded by papers, laptop open, tea steaming, as if Marcus's penthouse had been redesigned for something it had never been used for. Life. Sarah also worked with disability advocates now, consulting remotely, helping other people navigate the same system that had swallowed her. She turned pain into purpose without romanticizing it. She didn't say it made her stronger. She said it made her honest. Marcus respected that more than any inspirational speech. And Lily was thriving. Advanced programs, scholarships, mentorship, science fairs. Her teachers called her gifted, but Marcus knew the real reason she shone wasn't just intelligence. It was hunger. Not for food, for a future. They had moved too, not overnight. Not in a dramatic billionaire rescues poor family way. Marcus had refused to do it like that. He didn't want Lily thinking salvation came from a rich person arriving like a superhero. He wanted her to understand something harder and more powerful. Help is real. Community is real. And dignity doesn't require wealth. So they moved carefully. A safer apartment. Better building. Still modest. But with working heat. A functional elevator. Windows that didn't need plastic. A place where Lily could study without hearing neighbors scream through thin walls. Marcus visited often. Sometimes for dinner. Sometimes just to drop off books Lily wanted. Sometimes because he'd realized he didn't need a reason beyond this. He missed them. That was the greatest change. Marcus Thorne, once allergic to missing people, now felt it, and he survived it. That was what healing looked like. Not a clean transformation, but the ability to feel and not run. It hadn't been overnight. There were still days. Marcus woke up and the old instincts returned. The urge to isolate, the urge to control, the suspicion that joy was temporary and therefore dangerous. Some mornings, he'd stand at his window with coffee in hand, staring at the city like it was a chessboard, and he'd feel the familiar coldness slide back into him. Then his phone would buzz. A message from Lily. "Uncle Marcus, I need you to test my hypothesis." Or a text from Sarah. "Don't forget tonight." She's excited. And so am I. Or a call from Robert, his estranged friend, now slowly reconnected. "You free?" Robert would ask. "I'm in your neighborhood." And Marcus would pause, surprised by how many threads now reached for him. He had spent decades believing needing people made you weak. Now he was learning the opposite. Needing people made you alive. One Thursday, after dinner, they walked outside Aurelio together. The rain had stopped. The sidewalk shimmered. The city smelled like wet stone and possibility. Lily, now taller and bolder, stopped near the window where she had once stood shivering. She pressed her face against the glass playfully, mocking her old self. Then she leaned back and squinted into the street. "Checking for kids outside," she announced. "Like I used to." Sarah rolled her eyes, but there was affection in it. "Here we go." Lily pointed down the block. "If I see someone, maybe we invite them in?" Marcus stared at her, heart tightening. It was a ridiculous idea, and also the most Lily idea imaginable. Sarah sighed. "She gets her crazy ideas from you now." Marcus lifted an eyebrow. "From me?" Sarah nodded toward him. "You're the one collecting strays." Lily grinned. "It's true." "You started a scholarship fund," Sarah added, "and a veterans nonprofit." Lily kept counting. "And last week you hired 3 people from a re-entry program." Marcus frowned, defensive. "They were qualified," Sarah smirked. "Qualified, and you have a soft heart." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped, because it was true. He had changed his hiring practices without announcing it, without making a press release, without putting it on social media. He just started looking for people who needed a chance, not out of pity, out of recognition. Because Marcus had learned something Lily had known all along. People weren't problems to avoid. They were stories to understand. Sarah nudged him gently. "You used to think everyone wanted something from you." Marcus's jaw tightened at the memory. He had been certain of that belief. It had protected him, and it had killed him slowly. Lily swung between them, grabbing both their hands like she was claiming them. "Now we want you," Lily said simply. "Not your money. You, your time, your Thursday dinners, your science fair support, your weird serious face when you're pretending you're not proud." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He turned his head away quickly, pretending to look at a taxi, because he wasn't ready to let them see how close he was to tears. Sarah watched him with gentle understanding. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Marcus cleared his throat. "Fine." Sarah smiled softly. "You used to say that and mean you were dying inside." Marcus didn't answer. Because she was right. They walked to Marcus's car. Lily climbed in first, talking nonstop about a new experiment she wanted to do with bacteria cultures and temperature differences. Sarah buckled in carefully, adjusting her leg with practiced caution. Marcus got in last, sitting in the back seat beside them, which still felt strange. He used to sit alone in the back seat, like it was his private throne. Now he sat close enough to hear Sarah's breathing, close enough to feel Lily's excitement radiate in the air. As the car moved, Lily fell asleep. Not from boredom, from safety. Her head tipped gently onto Marcus's shoulder, the way it had the first time on their old couch. This time, Marcus didn't freeze. He adjusted himself carefully so she wouldn't wake. Sarah glanced at them, and her eyes softened. "She's going to change the world," Sarah whispered. Marcus looked down at Lily's sleeping face and felt something solid in his chest. "She already has," he whispered back. "Mine, at least." They arrived at Marcus's penthouse. 2 years earlier, the place had felt like a museum. Now it felt like a home, though not because Marcus had redecorated, because life had moved in. Lily's room down the hall had posters of planets and anatomy diagrams taped to the walls. A stack of books sat on her desk. Sarah's office had files and medical textbooks, and a whiteboard with notes. Marcus still had his expensive furniture, but now there were also blankets folded on the couch. A half-finished puzzle on the coffee table. A mug left in the sink. Evidence that the space belonged to humans now. Sarah moved slowly toward the couch, fatigue settling in. "Stay over," Marcus said, voice casual like it didn't matter. "You both have rooms." Sarah looked at him, eyebrow raised. "You want company?" Marcus swallowed. "Place feels empty without you," he admitted. Sarah's face softened. "Okay," she said quietly. "We'll stay." Marcus carried Lily to bed, careful and gentle. He tucked her in like he'd learned how through repetition. Sarah watched from the doorway. "You're good at that," she whispered. Marcus paused, surprised. "She taught me," he said. Then, after a beat, "You both did." Later, Marcus and Sarah sat on the couch, the city lights glowing outside like a distant ocean of stars. Sarah held a cup of tea with both hands. Marcus held a glass of water because he'd stopped drinking scotch as much. He didn't need it the way he used to. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was comfortable. "What made you open up?" Sarah asked softly. Marcus stared at the window. He thought about Catherine, Richard, the betrayal, the nights alone, the empty chair. "I thought isolation was safety," Marcus admitted. "For 23 years, it was my religion." Sarah nodded slowly. "But I was so lonely," Marcus continued, voice rougher now. "I forgot what not being lonely felt like." Sarah's eyes shone gently. "And Lily reminded you?" Marcus nodded. "She was just a kid," Marcus said, shaking his head. "Standing in the rain, not even asking for money, just asking for help for someone she loved." Sarah's mouth tightened, emotion rising. She didn't realize how brave she was. "She still doesn't," Marcus said. "But she changed everything." Sarah leaned back, exhausted, but peaceful. "This is family," Sarah said quietly. "Chosen family." Marcus felt the words settle inside him like something true. Family, not through blood, through choice, through showing up, through refusing to give up. Sarah looked at him then, really looked at him. "I never thought I'd have this again," she whispered. Marcus turned toward her, voice steady. "You're not complicated," he said. "You're real, honest, brave." Sarah smiled faintly. "How did you get good at saying the right thing?" Marcus almost laughed. "I had good teachers," he said, nodding toward the hallway where Lily slept. Morning came with laughter. Lily woke early, bursting into the kitchen with a plan for breakfast and a plan for Marcus's birthday. "I have an idea," Lily announced, scrambling eggs with seriousness like it was a scientific process. "Something special. Something fun." Marcus blinked. "For what?" Lily looked at him like he was slow. "Your birthday, obviously." Marcus felt his throat tighten. He had spent 23 birthdays alone. 23 dinners at table 17 where no one sang. No one surprised him. No one cared enough to plan. Now a 12-year-old was making eggs in his kitchen and casually announcing she was going to celebrate him. I'd like that, Marcus managed. Lily grinned. Good, because you're family. And family celebrates birthdays. Marcus stood there quietly, letting the words wash through him like warmth. Later that day, Marcus typed into a group chat Lily had created called The Science Experiment Family. The name was ridiculous. And perfect, he wrote. Thank you for tonight. See you Saturday for Lily's science fair. Sunday brunch. Thursday dinner. And every day in between. Because you stopped being an experiment and started being home. Responses appeared almost immediately. You're always welcome. This is your home too. Stop being mushy, Uncle Marcus. But yes, stuck with us forever. No take-backs. Uncle Marcus. The first time Lily had called him that, he had cried in the privacy of his bathroom because he didn't know how to handle belonging. Now, it just made him smile. That night, Marcus stood at his window again, looking down at the city. He thought about the man he used to be. So certain isolation was strength. That man had everything: billions, power, status. But nothing that mattered. Then a child stood in the rain, not asking for money, just asking for help for someone she loved. She had almost nothing, but she knew how to love. The irony was sharp enough to feel like a lesson carved into stone. Marcus had spent 23 years convinced everyone wanted something. Then he met two people who had every reason to want his money. But they wanted his presence, his time, his humanity. They wanted him, not his wealth. And they gave him something priceless in return. A reason to wake up. A place to belong. A family that chose him. Marcus learned fortune and loneliness can coexist. You can have everything and nothing. But also, poverty and love can coexist. You can have nothing and everything. And most importantly, walls we build to protect from pain also keep out joy. Isolation isn't strength. It's slower death. Marcus went to bed. The enormous bed no longer felt empty. Because down the hall, two people he loved were sleeping. Tomorrow, he'd have breakfast. Listen to Lily practice her science presentation. Help Sarah study. Show up, and the day after, again. Because that's what love was. A daily choice to be present. To be vulnerable. To let people matter. Marcus Thorne spent 23 years eating alone. He had been wrong about everything. Because the opposite of loneliness isn't wealth. It's love, connection, belonging. And that can't be bought, only built. One meal at a time. One knock at a time. This is the story of a man who had everything except what mattered most. And a girl who had almost nothing. Except what mattered most. Marcus Thorne spent 23 years building walls. Not because he loved being alone. Not because he enjoyed the silence, but because pain had convinced him that loneliness was safer than love. He told himself isolation was strength. He told himself it was wisdom. He told himself it was discipline. But the truth was simpler and harsher. He was afraid. Afraid of trusting the wrong person again. Afraid of being humiliated again. Afraid of giving someone access to his life, his heart, his time, and then watching them turn it into a weapon. So he learned to live behind glass. A penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows. A restaurant table with an empty chair. A routine so predictable, it felt like control. And for a while, it worked. He survived. He rebuilt his fortune. He won deals. He proved to the world that betrayal didn't destroy him. But survival isn't the same as living. And winning isn't the same as being whole. Because those walls that protected him from pain also protected him from everything else. From joy, from laughter, from belonging. From the simple, human comfort of sharing a meal with someone who sees you and stays. That's the hidden cost of trauma. It convinces you that avoiding pain is the same as building a life. But avoiding pain can quietly become a prison. Marcus didn't change because someone argued him into it. He didn't change because a therapist finally found the right sentence. He changed because a child did something most adults are too proud or too afraid to do. She knocked. She stood in the rain. She refused to accept that loneliness was normal, not because she was naive, but because she still believed people could be good. Lily didn't show up to Aurelio to manipulate him. She didn't show up to chase his money. She didn't show up because she thought a billionaire would solve her life. She showed up because her mother was suffering, and because she saw something in Marcus that everyone else ignored, a man surrounded by luxury, starving for connection. She didn't speak to his ego. She spoke to his emptiness, and that is why it worked. Because the glass between two worlds wasn't just money. It was fear. Fear that says, don't let anyone in. Fear that says, if you love, you lose. Fear that says, people only want what you can give them. Fear that says, being alone is safer. But fear is a liar. It tells you that walls protect you. It doesn't tell you they also shrink your world until you can barely breathe. That's what Marcus learned. Glass boxes don't protect you. They make your life smaller. They turn dinners into rituals of survival. They turn comfort into numbness. They turn independence into isolation. And eventually, they turn you into a person who forgets what warmth feels like. But glass can be opened. That's the point. You can open it even if you're shaking. You can open it even if you don't know what happens next. You can open it even if you're terrified. Especially if you're terrified. Because the things that scare us most are usually the things we need most. On the other side of that glass is vulnerability, risk, the possibility of pain again. But also on the other side is everything you've been missing. Love, connection, joy, a place to belong, a reason to wake up and actually want the day. Marcus met two people who had every reason to want his money. A mother who had been failed by the system. A daughter who had lived hungry and cold and small in a world that didn't notice her. If anyone had a right to demand something from him, it was them. But what they wanted wasn't his wealth. It was his presence. His time, his humanity. They wanted him, not his billions. And in return, they gave him something money can't buy. A family that chose him. A life that had meaning. A heart that could feel again. That's the greatest irony of the story. Marcus thought wealth would protect him, but it only gave him better walls. Lily had almost nothing, but she had courage. And courage is what opened the door. So here's the question this story leaves behind. What windows are you standing outside? What doors are you afraid to open? What walls are you calling wisdom that are actually just fear in disguise? Because somewhere in your life, maybe right now, someone is knocking. Someone who sees you. Someone who senses your loneliness. Someone who doesn't want your performance or your success. They want you. The real version. The human version. And the question isn't whether the knock will come. The question is, are you brave enough to answer it? Marcus Thorne spent 23 years eating alone. Now he's Uncle Marcus. A man who shows up for Thursday dinners, for science fairs, for Sunday brunch, for all the small, ordinary moments that quietly build a life worth living. He learned you can't buy connection, you can only build it. One meal at a time. One moment of courage at a time. One decision to show up, even when it's uncomfortable. Because in the end, what saves us isn't wealth. Not achievements, not control. It's love. It's belonging. It's the daily choice to be present, to let people matter, to let yourself matter too. So knock on the window. Open the door. Take the risk. Because on the other side is everything you've been missing. Everything that matters. Everything that makes life worth living. All you have to do is be brave enough to let it in.